have a picture of a knife that I brought into this project, and I want to make sure that I rasterize that. So I'm going to go over here in my layers panel. I'm going to select that layer. If I hold down my control button and click on it, I can rasterize that layer by just selecting rasterize layer. So let's go ahead and select the knife from this image. I'm going to use my quick selection tool, which is the fourth tool down below your move tool. And I want to make sure that I'm selecting the quick selection tool, not the magic wand. If I use a quick selection tool, it should be fairly easy for me to drag along the length of that knife and select that entire knife pretty well. So I want to make sure that I grab the whole knife really well. If you're not able to select this fairly cleanly, I would suggest that you maybe try using another tool, perhaps that polygonal lasso tool that we have used in the past. But I'm going to zoom in here just to make sure that I have a really good selection. And I'm seeing that it's kind of jagged and that it may require me to actually get a better, more accurate version of this selection. So I'm going to go ahead and use my polygonal tool, and I'll be right back once I make my selection. So I got a pretty accurate selection here of my knife, and what I want to do now is I want to select inverse, and then I'm going to hit delete on my keyboard. That takes care of the background of this knife. So we have one layer with the entire knife. What I want to do now is select only the handle. So let's try to use the quick selection tool for this. And that seems to have grabbed a pretty good selection there for the handle. So if I have the handle selected, all I have to do is hold down my Command and the letter C to copy, Command and the letter V to paste. What you'll notice is that that automatically made an additional layer here in my layers panel. So what I should have now is you'll have one layer that has the entire knife. That's this layer right here. And this layer right here actually created a layer that only has the handle. So that's two layers. One of them is the handle. Let's go ahead and name that handle. And this one is actually the knife. So we have two layers, one the knife, one the handle. So let's go ahead and make some 3D extrusions from these. So with the knife layer selected, I'm going to go to my 3D and I'm going to make a 3D extrusion. This is going to be the knife element of my 3D model. So I don't want it to be thick. I don't want to have this big of an extrusion on it. We're going to select the knife layer here where the 3D element is. And we're going to go up to our deform icon here, the second icon in properties, and we're going to make the extrusion. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and make it a 2 just because I do want it to have a little bit of a thickness so that it sort of resembles a blade. I wouldn't go more than a 2 and possibly maybe a 1. And that's all that we want for this. And that part of the knife is done. So we're going to go back to our layers panel. Now we're going to select our handle. Our handle is selected and we're going to go and make our 3D extrusion from that. Now if you notice, that actually has a little bit of a thickness to it, and the goal here is to make that handle look like something that we can actually grab and put our hand around, so that the knife actually looks something like you can pick up and cut something with. Now you may be okay by using this kind of a look for that handle. In other words, if I use my rotation tool, I'm just going to use it just to demonstrate what I'm talking about here. If I use my rotation tool and show you that handle, you'll see that it kind of has a three-dimensional element to it, and it feels like you might be able to grab it, and it could be a real handle to a knife. But I don't necessarily like that, so we're going to go ahead and change that a little bit. Let me just go back to my previous view, and I just did that by doing Option, Command, and Z. And so I want to be right back to where I started here. So I'm going to go ahead and select handle. This is the handle element, the 3D element that we created. And again, we're going to go back up to our properties and select deform, which is the second icon, and I want to make that 0. And now I'm going to go to the third icon to the right here in the properties panel, and I'm going to inflate the sides. But in this case, instead of just having the front or the back, I'm going to actually inflate both sides. So it should say front and back. Where it says sides, it should say front and back. And I'm going to go ahead and inflate that. And you'll notice in your secondary view over here that your handle will now be inflating. So I'm going to make it say about 25. I'm just going to go ahead and put 25 in there. That looks like a fairly good handle. And you'll see if I go ahead and turn this around a little bit, now you see that I actually have a handle that you might be able to grab. Let me go to my layers panel and just make my knife invisible so I can really see what we're talking about here. So you see that you have a handle here that actually is something you can hold on to. So I'm going to go back to make sure that that is perfectly aligned the way it should be. And so I want to make sure that that is perfectly aligned the way that it was before I moved it. And the reason I want to do that is because we want this to be very easy. So let's go back to our layers. We'll notice that we have one layer for our handle, and that indeed is a 3D layer. And we have one layer for our knife, and that also is a 3D layer. So let's go ahead and make them both visible. And let's select both of them by holding down your Shift key. You can select both of those layers. We'll go over to our menu in the layers panel and go down to merge layers. And what we should have, if we look at it in our 3D panel, is we should actually have both of those pieces already put together like a knife model, perfectly aligned and beautifully working together.